The program you're about to watch is a unique live investigation of the supernatural. It contains material which some viewers may find to be disturbing.
This is something new I'm trying. We're going under the name Real Horror versus Real Horror, unless I come up with something better, and I really hope I do. But the main idea is to work with a true crime channel to look at a real life horror with an interesting connection to a screen horror. Most of the time, it's going to be a film adaptation or a film inspired by some kind of abominable incident. But the one we're starting with is a little bit different than that. It's not so much an adaptation of, it's something occasioned by the horror. In this case, the horror came first. We're going to be talking about Ghostwatch, and I'm joined by Shrouded Hand, who's kindly lending me his time and taking over the IRL side of things. How you doing, Shrouded?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me on. This sounds like a fun project. Well, fun, given the horror of it, but
yeah,
it sounds like an interesting project, I think.
I'm glad you're interested in covering the other side of it, the real life horror inspired by Ghostwatch. Yeah. And it's a very odd one to start with because Ghostwatch is an odd little project.
Well, I remember when it first went out, but I remember it because I wasn't allowed to watch it. And because my parents, I was like, I think I was like 9 when it came out. My parents, they were probably right that I would have been traumatized by it because I was like, when I was a kid, I was obsessed with ghosts, and I'd have nightmares and I'd be lying awake all night thinking there were ghosts, and so they were probably right that I would have been traumatized by this. But I remember going into school on the Monday after it aired, and just all the kids were talking about it, and I remember the teacher had to like sit down the class and sort of say, yeah, it wasn't real. There was this like whole buzz going throughout the whole like year of school that I was in. They were going crazy. So that's like, I was aware of it, but I didn't get to actually watch it until probably about 10 years ago when it came, it was out on DVD, and I finally got to actually watch it. So, because it's never been aired since it was first released.
No, you're right. That is one of the really interesting things. They got in such hot water over this. There was quite a blowback to Ghostwatch, and we should maybe talk about sort of why that is. Effectively, Ghostwatch is I think it's fair to say, a precursor to found footage.
Yeah,
it is what you might call a mockumentary, and quite an ambitious one. Any coverage of Ghostwatch is going to end up talking about a couple of other incidences where the BBC tried to trick the public. So they're going to talk about the various April Fools. They'll talk about the spaghetti hoax on Panorama, or the trick to tell people that the Earth is going to be closer to the moon and gravity is going to be affected. If you jump at this particular time, you might be able to stay suspended in the air. Or the time in the mid-2010s when they convinced the public that David Cameron existed. The BBC has done many of these incidents, but Ghostwatch back in 1992 had the horror angle to it. They convinced people they were seeing a live broadcast of a paranormal investigation. You showed me an assurance that they ended up, by the sound of things, quite hastily putting out afterwards.
Yeah. I don't think it was immediately after the show, because I've seen the continuation. They've got that, like after the show, they just said what was going to be coming on next. But it must have been like after the next show, they must have been getting complaints, or there must have been so many people ringing in that they were like, "Oh, we've got to assure people that this is a real."
It is, of course, Halloween, and if you were with us for our Ghostwatch earlier, may I reassure you that it was just a story, and all's well here at Television Centre. Halloween continues on BBC Two now, where the marathon Vault of Horror is now showing Stephen King's Creepshow.
They had an episode of I suppose you would call it a precursor to Points of View, or maybe it was concurrent with Points of View.
Yeah, I think Points of View. Yeah, I think Points of View was on at the same time, but yeah, this was like more of a sort of live chat, wasn't it? With they had like an audience that come in and sort of berate the the makers of whatever show they were complaining about that week, I suppose.
Yeah, and they were sort of hauling them over the coals, saying, "How dare you trick us?" And
Yeah.
as you said, it's never been repeated.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect that might be quite related to the tragic incident that you're covering that was occasioned by the show.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if the timeline works out on that, or if they just possibly thought they couldn't get away with it again.
I'm not sure whether they just were doing it out of like sensitivity for the family, because they could easily show it again and put more of a warning in place and sort of, or just before the show, like, this is a dramatization, and really make it clear. I think that was maybe the issue to begin with, that people thought that there wasn't enough of a warning beforehand, that what they were watching was fiction.
Do you think it's possibly we're just very high IQ, we're very media savvy nowadays, and we just wouldn't fall for it, because of our big brains and all? But
I don't know. It might be because we've had years of Blair Witch Project, and especially with the internet as well. There's loads of like these, where Marble Hornets and these sort of like
I've wanted
YouTube
to get into
series.
them, but my gosh, I know I'd get addicted.
Yeah, well, I just feel like there's so much of that sort of stuff around nowadays that I feel like maybe you'd be a bit more cynical going into something like Ghostwatch. You'd turn it on and you'd think, is this just a hoax? Is this?
I'm inclined to agree. Although I don't know. Do you watch Inside Number 9?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. So they a couple of years ago did a live episode that was basically Ghostwatch all over again. They were very clearly inspired by Ghostwatch, and they'd done lots of updates that they would have to do in order to convince people. So they had live tweeting, interacting. So obviously it wasn't live, it was pre-recorded, it was preset, but they had the characters be confused about which cameras were broadcasting. They sent out a tweet on the accidental live broadcast, and then a tweet was posted at exactly that time. It did seem that it convinced a fair few people.
I think that was one episode that I missed, because I remember, like, while I was looking into Ghostwatch, that came up as an example, and I really avidly watched Inside Number 9, and when I was looking into it, I was like, I don't remember this episode at all. But
it's a very interesting one, but I would say, as clever as it is, it doesn't work as well as Ghostwatch, because so much of it relies on being live with errors, and I mean, I won't spoil the episode for you. It is very good, but it's sort of, without the pretense of it being live, it doesn't work. Whereas Ghostwatch doesn't have the sort of, I'd say, interaction with the BBC announcer and programming department that sort of detract from that. Something that would be obviously fixed in on rebroadcasts.
Yeah,
it wouldn't work as well. Whereas Ghostwatch, I really felt worked well, even though we obviously knew it wasn't live, we knew it was a hoax, and so on.
Yeah, I just think just having things like Twitter, or just having access to immediate information whenever you want it. We don't really appreciate now how, like, almost like cut off everyone was from each other back then. Like, each household was its own like insular thing, and you couldn't just, if you were watching Ghostwatch, you're thinking, what's going on? Is this real? You couldn't just go on, your phone and just check what people are saying on Twitter and get that immediate reassurance. You were just so insular and in your house. You're cut off from everyone else, sitting there at 9:00, 9:30 at Halloween night watching this thing,
and everyone else is watching that. There's 4 channels at that time. Channel 5 was a long way off.
You would have had a video recorder playing. You would have had a video recorder. You would have been able to record it, but you wouldn't be able to stop your video recorder halfway through the program and rewind it to check like the credits at the beginning, or oh, have I just seen a ghost there? Rewind it. You wouldn't be able to do that until the show had finished, or else you'd end up losing the recording and missing half of the program as you're
Yeah.
rewinding it. It's
I
not
mean,
like modern TV where you can just rewind it and play it, and
yeah, and that we should mention is something they absolutely used to their advantage. The
Mhm.
dastardly devious schemers knew the medium they were working with so well, and they played a very meta game with it.
Mhm.
So at multiple points, this is something I love about it. They will have a hidden ghost present, and they actually train the viewer to look for it. This is something I really love. It's very clever. They interrupt the show with a caller who says and they do this very early on. They interrupt the show with a caller saying they think they've seen a hidden ghost in the background, and they spend some time on it. And this is training the viewer to look for the ghost.
Right, now let's roll the tape.
And they show different versions of the footage. So the first time you see it, the ghost is really obvious, and you have a few seconds to catch it. And then they go back to a different version of the scene, and the ghost isn't there.
Yeah, and they go
And
through it like frame by frame. They're like, right, let's play it back slow, and it's like,
I can't see anything now myself. False alarm?
there's a great moment where they do a pan inside the bedroom, and it's moving very fast, and the ghost is right there against the curtains. And then the cameraman almost catches it and jerks back.
yeah, and
It's
zooms
obviously
in, and
it's obviously a cut,
yeah,
but you don't have time to go back. You can't check it, and you're there just sort of thinking, have I gone mad? Have I missed it?
yeah.
It's such a brilliant devious trick they play, and I am a massive fan of Mike Flanagan's work, especially The Haunting of Hill House. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I'm pretty sure we were talking about it on the last stream, and I said I'm going to watch it, and then I haven't.
Every time we talk, I'm evangelizing for the good word of Mike Flanagan. I know.
Yeah.
But they do the hidden ghost thing here, and I think, I mean, this is something I would love to talk about. How influential Ghostwatch has been.
Yeah.
I think the hidden ghosts thing is straight from here. I would love to know if Mike Flanagan was inspired by Ghostwatch. What impressed me so much was the fact that they trained the audience to look for the hidden ghosts.
Yeah, and also like the amount of time I've watched it quite a few times since it came out on DVD, and only when I was researching this video, I looked up. There's a YouTube video, like a compilation of all the pipe sightings. There's so many that I've missed. Like I've watched it so many times, and there's a really obvious one where they're like they're playing a tape back of like the girls talking, and pipes comes out behind the doctor, Dr. Pascoe.
Oh.
You see him really like when they play when you watch this compilation, and it's like circling around where the ghost appears. It's really obvious, and I've watched Ghostwatch so many times, I've never spotted it before. It's so I'm wondering also, as well as this aspect of, oh, did I see that? There's also, it might have a psychological impact on the viewer where you don't see it consciously, but like you sort of pick up on it in your subconscious. There's something there, like it gives you a sense that there's like a presence, even though you're not consciously thinking, oh, was there a ghost in the background? So there's some points you might just pick up on this, because your brain's trained to pick up on faces, isn't it? So I wonder if there's like also an aspect of it sort of playing with your subconscious as well.
Oh, definitely. Great horror does this. In fact, I'd say generally great film does this. The phrase that Red Letter Media use, I think, is "you didn't notice, but your brain did." I'm trying to think of other examples where they do that sort of influence. Oh, The Invisible Man, the 2021. Have you seen that?
I recently watched that. Yeah, pretty good.
What do you think
enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. Yeah, I liked the I really liked at the beginning where he's sort of, he's in the house, but you don't really know. She's kind of like, he's just creeping around and being a bit sort of stealthy and sort of gaslighting her a bit. I really like those bits right at the beginning.
Yeah.
It gets a bit actiony for me towards the end.
That it's fair enough. It's fair enough. There's a great thing on the suit, on the design of the suit, where it's covered in bug-like holes,
Yeah.
and that is meant to subconsciously make you think of bugs, insects.
Mm.
If you have trypophobia, it's going to
Yeah.
set that off massively.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
So yeah, the subtle influence is amazing. Another thing is facial distortions in monster designs will often be, the faces will be slightly misaligned and slightly uncanny, just to creep you out a little bit.
Yeah. Well, Pipes has got that, hasn't he? He's got when you actually see you don't really see his face much, but when you actually you've seen the behind the scenes of his makeup, he's got the eye gouged out with the blood coming down one side of his face. He does look a bit sort of off center, and
it's really gruesome. And these quick flashes of him, you are never going to be able to appreciate it. And I don't think there's even, I don't know about the DVD, but the version I saw was in no way high resolution enough to appreciate the detail.
Yeah.
But on some level, your brain is picking these up, and you can't even stop it doing that. It is just going to pick these details up and instantly categorize this person as unwell, unhealthy, and sort of start setting you on edge.
I've heard some things about things they had planned behind the scenes that I heard that they planned to put in sounds that wouldn't be audible to the human ear, but that pets in the house would pick up on, and they'd start looking at the screen and going crazy. I think in the end they decided the speakers in televisions wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah,
but it was something it sort of shows the sort of level of how much they wanted to mess with people's heads to put stuff like that in.
It's entirely a technical barrier. Otherwise, they would have done it.
I'd love to know what else, what other stuff they did.
Yeah, you do wonder about what else was hidden. The director said apparently there are 13 hidden pipe sightings.
Yeah, I can't count 13.
No, I spotted several, but some of them are quite obscure, like very brief ones. He's in the background.
Or there's somewhere there's somewhere it's in the cuts between you'll see him for 2 frames, where it's towards the end where the camera's going a bit sort of shaky and stuff. Some of the cuts where it's in between frames, there's a little flash of pipes, but you don't really see his face very well. It's all distorted. You just get a glimpse. It's that subconscious thing again. It's
I've done a lot of academic psychological surveys, and one phenomenon I've seen tested a fair few times is seeing how little you need to see something for your brain to register it fully. One of the things I'll do is I will flash you a face for about 2 frames. And you just have to classify the emotion you thought you saw, or the sex you thought you saw, or the age you thought you saw. And you might think, I've seen this for a 24th of a second. I'm not going to get it, but you will be surprised how accurate your hunch is. Your brain just got that straight away.
Yeah, it makes me think of the, when they said they used to put subliminal advertising into cinemas when they'd flash up some popcorn or a drink or something for a split second, so you wouldn't see it, but you get hungry all of a sudden. I don't know if they were true. There was always rumors that they used to do that. It's in the trailers for cinemas, so you'd go and buy a drink or something. But
I see no reason not to carry over an old tradition from the channel, the old pint of Guinness synopsis. If someone were to ask you while you were ordering a pint of Guinness at the bar, what Ghostwatch is about, what would you tell them in the time it took to get served your Guinness?
I remember you asked me to do this on that
it's
movie.
Brutal, isn't it?
I really failed badly.
All right, do you want me to do it? I can.
What I'd say I'd say, well, do you know Most Haunted, and do you know Blair Witch? Well, it was the thing that inspired. It was basically the precursor to those things. It was. I don't know. Sorry, I'm really bad at this.
I know. It's a cruel thing to put someone on the spot for. Okay, so Ghostwatch from 1992 portrays itself as a live broadcast investigation of a haunted house. It is a family with just a mother and 2 girls who are living in a council house, and they have had a long history of disturbances. And the BBC says it wants to investigate whether this is actually true. They get Michael Parkinson to front it, who is obviously, Brits are going to recognise him as a serious guy. They have other factual reporters on set, lending credibility to the fact that this is a real live broadcast, and they're going to try and see if this is a real life haunting. And they start off taking it kind of, they're not super serious about it. There is an academic who's really sort of on board, who has worked with the family and is making the case for it as a real haunting. And they're treating it as sort of a fun broadcast. But stuff gets more disturbing as they go on. And it starts to get more chaotic. And we start to see what we think is actually a real haunting. And from there, it gets really disturbing, really dark, and increasingly chaotic. The live broadcast basically breaks down until ultimately, well, maybe I won't go into exactly where we are at the end, but let's just say it gets very scary and chaotic over the course of that 90-minute broadcast.
It starts off extremely goofy as well, I think. This, especially with Craig Charles, and he's sort of jumping out of cupboards.
I loved seeing him.
Yeah.
But that was such a touch of genius. Getting the serious presenters fronting it like you would if it were real, and Craig Charles is there. He's the guy to sort of help deflate the tension, and he gets you to lower your guard.
Yeah.
You come in, you laugh at the silly premise. People are taking it too seriously. You have a good laugh, and then your guard is down. You're relaxed, and then you're brought in, and then they can effectively start unnerving you from there.
And it's such a slow burn as well, from when it starts to when the things really start to happen. It's over the course of like an hour, pretty much. It's such a slow burn how it just lulls you into this sort of, you're just watching a fun live program. It's it's all a bit of fun. No one really believes it, and then just there's a knock, and then something else happens, and then it just builds up so slowly over the course of an hour. And it's not to say that it's boring, but it's just the way it doesn't just jump out with the scare straight away and reveal it doesn't like reveal its hand. It really does a good job of just drawing you in, making you feel like you're watching a real live broadcast. And they were really strict about made sure the cameras they use on the live broadcasters, there will only be cameras that they could actually use if they were doing a live broadcast. They wouldn't use any like studio cameras that they wouldn't be able to use in that exact setting. So it all just feels really authentic, and it's got that slightly grainy handheld look that I suppose now that we're used to like found footage movies, we're kind of it doesn't seem as revolutionary. I suppose I think back then that was a bit more of an interesting touch to have that sort of handheld, slightly low quality look to it.
Yeah, and the awkwardness is, of course, as in any found footage, the awkwardness is great for hiding stuff and implying stuff and working around bits that they want you to almost see but not fully glimpse.
Yeah.
Mike!
What they reveal about the origins of the ghost, and they just have some really disturbing details in there.
It really does. I mean, it keeps you guessing. We get so it's about an hour into it. We're given a sort of live on the ground interview with Craig Charles. Craig Charles is doing a vox pop and gets a really disturbing story about an incident in the park.
And they'd found this dead black Labrador.
And how had it died?
Well, it had been cut open, like something in a butcher's shop.
Is that all that happened?
Well, it was pregnant. There were fetuses scattered all over. The kids weren't late for weeks.
I should imagine not.
But the fact that they're talking about a dog being ripped open, fetuses all over the park, and it messing up the children, you're like, steady on.
Yeah, it just really cuts through that like light-hearted tone, doesn't it? It's suddenly you think, that's pretty serious.
Yeah. For me, like it's lovely and disturbing without showing too much when it's just the noises and the children being scared and the implications of the ghost, that's effective enough. I'm a massive fan of the 1963 version of The Haunting, which really doesn't have to show you anything to be terrifying. This has a lot of that energy. But then we get footage of the older daughter with her face scratched up in a really nasty way.
Yeah.
And you start to think, okay, they're going quite far here. They're not holding back. This is that's dark stuff. I noted that at 1 hour, 3 minutes, Parkinson has almost it's a bit meta. Just before we get the really disturbing details about the background of the ghosts, 1 hour, 3 minutes, Parkinson starts saying, effectively, send your children to bed now. It's past the watershed.
Yeah.
Send them to bed.
Please, would you switch off the TV and please send your kids to bed?
Yeah, he's like, yeah, this might be a bit scary now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they used that as like a defense, didn't they? And I remember in that talkback program, they were saying, well, we did, warn people in the show that it was about to get scary.
It's a fair old point of like, it's after the watershed. We warned you.
Yeah.
They are your children in your household.
But about the big sort of switch about halfway, about an hour in, it's revealed that the girl's making the knocking noises herself, and it suddenly Parkinson's like, oh well, I guess we've got the answer. It was all fake all along, and it's suddenly like it almost like deflates the whole thing for a second. You think, oh, it was just the kids making it up all along, and that's just before it all starts to go really crazy. It's almost like it's I don't know how to word it. It's almost like it's sort of purposefully deflating the horror just to ramp it up all of a sudden. It's giving you like a second false sense of security.
I totally agree with you. I think that's exactly what it is doing. Like we said at the start, try and build up a little bit of tension, and then Craig Charles makes a big joke of it. And they're just sort of treating it as lighthearted.
Yeah.
Tension released, and they can start doing some work influencing you. Just like you said here, we've gone an hour in. Parkinson's basically said, send your kids to bed. And then it's all fake. And so exactly, yeah, you psychologically relax, and then they start ramping up again massively and going incredibly disturbing. I think you're absolutely on the money.
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite bits. Just that bit where, and also because it's based on the Enfield Poltergeist case. I don't know if you know much about that, but that was a similar thing that they. Because have you seen in the end credits it says the consultant Guy Lyon Playfair?
No, I didn't.
He's a guy who investigated. There was supposedly a real life poltergeist case called the Enfield Poltergeist, and it was very similar to this. It was two girls in their bedroom, and it was a poltergeist attacking them. And this guy, Guy Lyon Playfair, he wrote a book about it, and he investigated it, and that was something that they'd noticed that the girls were playing tricks. Like they'd leave the tape recorder running secretly, and they'd hear the girls like saying, "Like, let's do this." But then there was other times where strange things would happen where no one was around. So I feel like it's taken a lot of inspiration from this real life case where these kids were making up a lot of the phenomena themselves to try and I don't know, it was sort of to try and make the investigators stick around and believe that it was real, but then at the same time there was other weird stuff going on that they couldn't explain.
No, definitely. I think it's obviously what they're most inspired by. I know The Conjuring 2 was inspired by the Enfield Poltergeist as well. So talking about sort of the disturbing background that's inspiring the story, we get the background in two parts. Details about a baby farmer called Mrs. Seddon and Raymond Tunstall. Now, baby farmer wasn't really familiar to me. I'd never heard that term.
Yeah, I had to look it up because I was like, what the hell's a baby farmer? Yeah.
I think they underplayed that because that is some disturbing detail. Very disturbing. You could charitably call it an independent orphanage, but basically someone would be running a house and they would take in unwanted children, and the parents would pay them to keep the kid and then basically disappear out of the picture. But Mrs. Seddon was taking the money and killing the children. And that is dark stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's,
Yeah.
and that's, you notice there that so much of the horror in Ghostwatch really focuses on children. So children being mutilated, children's cries being heard. Then we're having the incident with the dog in the park, the pregnant dog being torn apart. And it feeds into Raymond Tunstall, who was, we find out very late in the show, about 80 minutes into the broadcast, someone calls up who was a former social services worker, who has the inside scoop on Raymond Tunstall, who had a room in the house unofficially let to him. And he was described as a very disturbed individual. And they, unlike Nightmare on Elm Street, they don't dance around it and imply things. They straight up say that he was a child molester and a very dangerous individual. Again, I just have to keep reminding myself, this is 1992, broadcast on BBC One. It's so much heavier than I thought they would ever go.
Well, I know you're always reading about people that were knifed and all that sort of thing, but somebody was knifed around here that was 5 years old.
5 years old?
Yeah, I think that was probably one of the complaints, was it was on too early, even though it was after the watershed. People were like, this is way too dark for this early on at night. Surely this should have been on at like... I mean, I think it's quite, like, most of the stuff in there is quite tame, I think, up until you hear these stories of the, apart from like the scratches on the girl's face, but there's not really... I think that's probably what makes them more disturbing, is these things really just, they seem out of place when you hear these. Suddenly you just hear a story about some child molester or a dog being disemboweled in the park, and it just really cuts through that goofy tone that they've been going through for most of the show. And it suddenly just makes you think, oh god, where's this going?
They couldn't show any of it, but my gosh, do they describe it in great detail.
I think it's better like that as well, when you've got something that conjures up an image in your head that you can't see. A lot of the time that's worse than actually seeing the thing itself.
Oh, 100%. I mean, you and I will be veterans of 80s movies, and when you can't see the killer, when you're just having the stalker cam, when it's all built up, your brain is doing all the work. And it's almost like, I'm fine with you not showing the monster until the last 3 minutes, because often the effects have not aged super well. So you keep that thing in the shadows where it's most effective.
It's like how people always remember the Texas Chainsaw Massacre being way gorier than it actually is. Like, if you look through it, there's hardly any blood in that movie, but when you think back on it, people just think it was like the goriest thing ever. But it's all implied. You build it up in your head, these images.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've seen high definition photos of the chap who is playing our main ghost. Our main ghost is referred to as Pipes throughout, or Mr. Pipes, because of the banging on the pipes. He meets a very dark end that explains his appearance. We're told he's bald, he's either got no eyes or red eyes, and he's wearing a black dress, which is quite an odd image. But we piece together that the baby farmer, Mrs. Seddon, who dies after doing some evil deeds, she appears to have been influencing Raymond. I mean, it might be that he was just disturbed and it's her influence that made him do the crimes against children. But she seems to take him over, which seems to be why he's wearing a dress when he has the appearances. They note that he used to, he started doing it before he died. So I just take it as that's all the influence of Mrs. Seddon. I don't know if you took it
Before
that
she
way.
died.
So after she died, he moves into the room and she starts influencing him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how I. Yeah, it's almost like Pipes is a ghost within a ghost. Like he's the ghost of this guy, possessed by the ghost of this woman. Almost, it's like it's going back through generations. Yeah.
It makes it very creative, I think.
Yeah.
Like much more than just a standard haunting. It's like got these deep layers to it, and your natural thought is, what was before Mrs. Seddon?
Mm-hmm.
And there's some lines in that. You get a brief appearance from a spiritualist who talks about trying to do an exorcism and it going horribly, but he talks about the haunting almost accumulating. The experiences that people have shape them, but the experiences within a building will shape it. And it seems like it's just accumulating and building power there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The fate of Raymond Tunstall, who would go on to be Pipes, is another one of those bits that they just imply, but it is absolutely grim.
Yeah, but he dies with all these cats around him, and because he's locked in the house, they haven't got anything to eat, so they start to feast on his face.
They have such a creepy line about it, and it's brilliant. It's all they need to say.
Tunstall hanged himself. Did it where he kept his tools, under the stairs. It was 12 days before anybody found him. He had about a dozen cats. The cats were locked in, of course. 12 days. They got hungry. They got to work.
And it's that excellent explanation. Okay, oh yeah, that's why his eye is gone. That's why his face is mangled.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that was really good storytelling, really good world building. There was a mini bit that I really liked as well that was quite clever in terms of manipulating the audience. So they have the academic who is a parapsychologist and has been working with the family. She believes it's a real haunting, Dr. Pascoe. And the BBC, they say because they're on the BBC, they have to be impartial, they have to be balanced. Of course, it's a BBC. And they bring on another witness, another academic, and it's an American. And I thought that was...
I love that guy.
He's having a great time, but I also thought that was quite subtle. Sort of, he's going to be reasonable as well. He's going to be saying the materialist explanation.
Mm.
But he's an American.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's a subtle thing to just make you doubt him a little bit more.
Yeah. And he's quite rude as well, like not just because he's like American and quite bombastic. He's he's quite rude in it, the words he uses and stuff. It kind of even if you were on the side of not believing any of it, it sort of subconsciously turns you against him because he's been a bit obnoxious. And
it does. It's
No, I was just going to say I hadn't thought of that. The fact that he was, the fact that they'd made him American, it was all, it's almost like to sort of other him slightly to the, his opinion to sort of to a British audience.
Yeah. Possibly I'm paranoid and seeing manipulation everywhere, but I thought it was a clever little thing to do it.
Yeah.
As for what goes down at the end, I mean, we really see something that is going to become a massive trope of found footage. Even though this isn't so much found footage, it is effectively that, and the real found footage genre would come on and learn a lot from Ghostwatch. We have that trope of at the end it breaks down into chaos and you're really not quite sure what is happening. And I'd say it's to the strength of the story. It's like we said all the way throughout here. It leaves so much to your imagination. You fill in the blanks. All we know is that Sarah's been pulled into the under the stairs closet, unfortunately referred to as the glory hole throughout the programme.
In a dark room under the stairs. The glory hole, as we used to call it when I was a kid.
It's in here. It's in the glory hole.
Yeah, terms have changed a bit. Aye.
I mean, one thing that didn't age well is the resolution. The other thing, It's a
The
glory
resolution?
hole.
Uh,
Yeah, like it's quite the version I couldn't get anything HD. The only version I've seen of it is, as you would expect, it's in 4:3, and it looks like it's got maybe 7 pixels.
mhm. I don't know. I've really tried to dig out my DVD and it's mysteriously vanished. I think something spooky's gone
It's
on, to be honest.
pipes
Yeah,
again. Gosh darn it!
but yeah. So I've been watching the same version as you. I think really, uh, really pixelated. So you can't even see pipes half the time. All the bits where you're supposed to be able to see pipes, you can't even see them. So
Downstairs. Just outside.
Yeah, we see her pulled under the stairs. Fate unconfirmed. The elder daughter's taken out on a stretcher. Something's happened to the cameraman, and then at the end, it seems that Michael Parkinson ends up possessed by pipes
yeah,
himself.
the wind machine comes out. I think to be honest, I think the last few minutes. I mean, I suppose they're trying to show, it was fake, but it goes a bit overboard. Like all of a sudden, there's like wind coming in the studio, and they're all getting blown around, and it goes a bit overboard. But I feel like they did it intentionally, just in case people were still believing it by that point. It kind of trying to make it obvious that this is a drama, this is a film.
Yeah, it does sort of lose me at that bit as well. Like so much chaos is happening. I mean, it's a nice way of hiding the transitions to different parts of the story, so you can, because you're going to different bits, you can kind of skip over unimportant bits and have a fast moving story, which is really quite nice. They're very effective when they have you lose the feed from the house, and then suddenly you have Craig Charles going in and literally cut out, and just seeing the police arrive and someone come out on a stretcher. And it's a great way of it's like a montage that isn't a montage, which is quite crafty editing. But yes, by the time they get to the big explosions and wind machine, I am a little bit bit over the top. I also have to say their Welsh caller was maybe the other obviously weak point for me. They have a caller who I think he's meant to be Welsh, and I just feel like it's another person they got in, and they said, "Can we pay you to do a Welsh voice as well?" I was not hugely impressed.
Yeah, he lays it on a bit thick. I also thought the youngest daughter had a bit of she wasn't that good at acting, so some of her lines you think she's definitely acting there,
Yeah,
but she's a child. I'm not dissing some child actor, but she's a bit like
we've seen worse.
Definitely
we have definitely seen worse from the child actor department. You know what I'm going to have to put in here?
There are too many of them. What are we going to do?
There's been some bad child actors over the years. I mean, she's not terrible, but I feel like sometimes when she's delivering her lines, it takes me out of it a little bit. But I suppose also, if it was like a live recording, they might have, if it was real, they might have got her to rehearse the lines, what she was going to say beforehand anyway. So it might be that, like, if it was a real situation, this kid might be delivering her lines as if she'd rehearsed them, because they might have got, the production team might have said, "Oh well, what are you going to say when we ask you this question?" "Oh yeah, say that." So
yeah, there are definitely a few bits like that, but generally I was pretty happy with them. I don't think there were really many things that didn't work well. When you go on a rewatch, you are sort of prepped for a lot of, I guess, what you'd expect from found footage and most haunted style things. That a lot of the time they're doing a big hype, but really they go into a room and nothing happens. It's kind of like the old Paranormal Activity effect. Is like a lot of it is nothing happens, but you're expecting it to, and you're primed for it to. But on the rewatch, I mean, I've only done 2 watches of this, but it still worked for me on the second time round. I still really appreciated it.
Yeah, I liked it. Yeah, I watched it with my wife, and she was like, I feel like I can tell they're faking it. Like from the start, she was like, it's just not convincing. But I don't know. For me, it worked.
Yeah, I saw it as very authentic. Just my vague memories of TV at the time were just I was getting all the nostalgia and
Yeah.
thinking, oh yeah,
Like
I can remember.
I feel like the acting in it's corny, but it's at the beginning, but it's so sort of meant to be. You know,
Mm.
it's got a real vibe of. It just really takes me back to that era of like 90s sort of high energy live TV. You know, that sort of vibe that you get from these sort of corny presenters on live TV, and I feel like they just really captured that whole atmosphere. But
Yeah, it helps that they're largely doing BBC presenters are largely just doing their day job. So I thought Parkinson was amazing in this.
oh yeah,
You get the
he was
feeling
probably
he's
my
just
favorite one. I loved the way. I thought he was so funny. The way he keeps like shutting her down when that doctor's talking. He's like, oh okay, and he's like, he does little smile to the camera as if he's like, all right, whatever.
for a story about a cross-dressing child murderer and molester. It's got some really charming bits like that. It
Yeah,
was just a little bit of charming nostalgia that I appreciated.
yeah, definitely. Really like captures a time period, I think.
So would you say that this is outside of, say, the Inside Number 9 episode that's very, very based on Ghostwatch? Do you think this had quite an impact on the genre, maybe going beyond? I mean, it's predating Blair Witch by 7 years. Or do you think it's too obscure?
The found footage genre as a whole?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I think when you see so many things in it that, like the night vision camera at the end, that just looks so found footage that it can't not have influenced these things, can it? I don't know. Like,
it feels weird to say, oh no, they definitely tracked down a BBC broadcast from 1992 that was never repeated anywhere because of all the controversy. But then I'm like,
yeah, maybe. That's a good point.
Simultaneous invention is a thing, but
yeah. So when did Blair Witch come out? In like 99?
99.
Yeah.
99. I saw it in a double bill with Austin Powers 2, The Spy Who Shagged Me. Or was it?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was those on the same day.
I don't know whether maybe that would have given it enough time to, for a few home taped copies to circulate and get to America. But maybe it's more a case that these ideas just sort of go out into the ether and, they're just in people's heads then, and they sort of disseminate around the world. And this idea of the sort of mockumentary horror film is just out there in the world now, and it makes its way over to the minds of some filmmaker and the other side of the world. And yeah,
I'd love to think
it's hard to, because before you said that to me, I just sort of assumed that it influenced these things, but now I'm thinking that it wasn't out on DVD or tape or anything. It was just it was shown once and that was it. So the chances of it actually like influencing someone directly is quite slim, really, isn't it? It just feels so influential when you watch it now. There's so many things in there that just feel like you're watching a modern found footage horror movie, and you just think, oh, that's definitely like influenced things. But
it really does feel like seeing the genre be invented. Gosh darn it, with Ghostwatch, I just feel like some of the tropes are basically right there.
Yeah.
The static cams following someone around with a bit of chaos. Lots of fear built out of not seeing very much. The night vision cam, and of course the frankly inevitable bit where you just cut off the broadcast suddenly.
It could be that just live TV was invented. The techniques and things like the night vision camera came out, and just from that point onwards, it was only inevitable that someone would look at these things and think, well, that would probably be good used in a horror movie or some kind of creepy setting. Imagine if there was a live broadcast, but then something terrifying happens. That'd be interesting. Maybe it's just one of those ideas that just when the technology came around, it was just inevitable. And I don't know. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with wild speculation on the internet. I'll say it here. They stole the whole thing.
Yeah.
Blair Witch creators very clearly nicked the whole thing, and they should be sued. How about that?
Okay, yeah, decided. It doesn't try and look like a horror film, apart from towards the end. Like I said, it goes dark, but the lights are on through the whole thing pretty much. Apart from when they're outside, like in the park, and it's dark. But it doesn't try to look like a horror film at any point. It's always trying to look like a live TV broadcast. It's not trying to sort of feed you the idea that you're watching a horror film.
That's what makes it more effective, I reckon.
Yeah, definitely.
Just like the old novels, read your Frankenstein, read your Dracula. It's framed as someone writing letters to you, so they can sneak the story in. Yeah. Oh, good stuff. I mean, after all this time, I should ask, like, did you find it effectively scary? I mean, you'd seen it many a time, but
yeah, I found it spooky on my rewatching just recently, and I was watching it on like I say, really low quality video on the internet, and it was still effective. I really regret, even though I know it would have traumatized me, I really regret not being able to watch it when I was a kid. I think I probably would have had PTSD, but but it's just it feels like so iconic, and all the kids, all the people that were kids then talking about it nowadays and how much it affected them. I really regret not being able to see it originally, but yeah, it's still effective today. It's
yeah, I found myself getting very involved, very thinking, like, not just like, oh gosh, that's going a bit far, but like, oh my gosh, that poor kid. And feeling disturbed and wondering, like, oh my, did I spot pipes then? It really emotionally engaged. And of course, the litmus test I have is, was my wife traumatized? Yes, she slept very badly. So fantastic win. Yeah.
My wife wasn't as impressed, I don't think. I think she enjoyed it, but she was like a bit like, I'm not. I don't think she bought into it as much as I did. But
alas, I love it when she asks, when mine asks me, "Can we turn it off, please?"
That's a sign of a good movie.
I suppose I should actually say that the creator behind this has done a lot of work over the years to build on this, building up a bit of a culture of rewatching on Halloween, and did a follow-up show called National Seance Live, which is quite interesting to look at. There's also a behind-the-scenes documentary released in, I want to say 2013, called Ghostwatch Behind the Curtain.
Yeah.
I couldn't get my hands on it. It's one of the few things that is not just available easily on the internet unless you want to pay for the DVD. So
apparently it has been released again, but I don't know. I don't know when. This year, apparently, and I have heard there's another documentary coming out on Halloween this year about Ghostwatch.
How would that be?
I'm glad you asked me to do this, actually, because I was planning to do a video on it absolutely years ago. I had a series where I was looking at found footage movies. It's probably about 5 years ago, so I never got round to it. And one of them I wanted to cover was Ghostwatch. I really wanted to look at that, but I just dropped the series after a while because I moved on to other things. So I'm glad I've been able to revisit it. I've been on a deep dive of Ghostwatch for the last week, just looking at the reactions to it, and there's some more funny ones. Like, somebody sent a bill to the producers for new trousers for a husband because apparently he soiled himself watching Ghostwatch and things like that. So there was a big reaction to it, and
that reminds me of a story about Psycho, where a chap wrote to Hitchcock and said, "My wife watched Le Diabolique and she's too scared to take a bath. And now she's seen Psycho and she's too terrified to take a shower. What am I going to do?" And Hitchcock sends him a tenner and says, "Take it to the cleaners."
Beast! I got it! Look at that twist, Mike Smith, isn't it?
That was great. I really enjoyed chatting Ghostwatch with you. I'm so glad that this was suggested for us to cover. And if anyone is interested in the real life event that followed Ghostwatch, that is basically the whole reason that I'm making this, then go over to Shrouded Hand's channel. He is going to cover it in his own style. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this format is interesting to you. If it is, we have a lot more that we can cover in this way. And thank you for watching. And thank you, of course, Shrouded Hand, for coming on.
Cool, yeah. Thanks
Sorry,
for having me
I
on.
messed that up so much.
Sounded all right to me.
Oh, gosh.
The program you're about to watch is a unique live investigation of the supernatural. It contains material which some viewers may find to be disturbing.